All right, let's talk about a word you use probably every single day. A word that, whether you realize it or not, is the engine behind all of our moral thinking. We're going to dive into the philosopher G.E. Moore's incredibly simple but totally game-changing idea about what's really going on with the concept of good.
I mean, think about it, right? We say stuff like this constantly. She's a good person. What's the right thing to do here? We talk about virtues, we wonder if our actions are wrong. This is the stuff of our daily lives, and it's the very subject matter of ethics.
But have you ever stopped to wonder what the common thread is here? Because lurking under all these different phrases, ought, virtue, wrong, is one single powerful idea that they all depend on.
Yep, the word good. According to G.E. Moore, the biggest puzzle in ethics isn't about some complicated set of rules. It's about figuring out what on earth we actually mean when we use this one simple word. So here's the plan. We're going to break it all down. First, we'll see why what is good is the most fundamental question. Then we'll tackle the huge problem of trying to define it. We'll get into Moore's famous analogy about the color yellow, unpack the naturalistic fallacy, and finally, see how this all leads to a much clearer way of thinking about two different kinds of good.
Okay, so a lot of philosophers, they jump right into asking about good conduct. What are the right actions? What should we do? But Moore was like, hold on, we're skipping a step. You can't possibly figure out what good conduct is if you haven't first asked the much more basic question, what is good itself?
And this is where, for centuries, things have gotten, well, really messy. Philosophers have been trying to pin down the word good by saying it's just another word for something else, like pleasure or what people desire. But Moore argued this whole approach is a trap. So picture this. You've got philosopher A over here who says, good means pleasure. Then philosopher B comes along and says, no, good means what is desired. What happens next? Well, they get into a huge argument about whether pleasure is always desired or if what's desired is always pleasurable. But hang on a second, are they even talking about ethics anymore? Nope, they're stuck in a debate about psychology. They're just talking past each other.
And this is Moore's brilliant move. He calls it the open question argument. It works like this. Take any definition of good you can think of. Let's stick with good means pleasure. Moore points out that you can always very sensibly ask, okay, but is pleasure good? The fact that this question isn't nonsense, that it isn't a silly circular question like is pleasure pleasant, proves that good and pleasure must be two totally different concepts.
So if good is this thing we can't define, then what the heck is it? Well, this is where Moore comes up with this fantastic analogy that just makes it all click.
No, really, pause and think about it. How would you actually define the color yellow to someone who's never seen it before in their life? You might, point to a banana or a rubber duck. You could even get all scientific and talk about wavelengths of light. But none of that explains the experience, the raw sensation of seeing yellow. You can't break it down. You just know it when you see it. And that is the core difference he's getting at. On the one hand, you have something complex, like a horse. You can define a horse by listing all its parts and properties. But yellow, it's a simple notion. It has no parts, it's just yellow. It's a fundamental building block of how we perceive the world. And that's exactly what Moore means by a simple notion. It's one of those bedrock ideas that you can't analyze any further. You just grasp it directly. It's a starting point for thought, not an end point of a definition.
And that leads us right to the punchline in Moore's own words. His whole point is that good works just like yellow. It's a simple, non-natural quality that we intuit or perceive in certain things in the world. You can't define it, but you can recognize it.
Okay, so if good is simple and indefinable, then trying to define it isn't just a challenge, it's a massive mistake. And Moore gave this mistake a very famous name. He called it the naturalistic fallacy. This is the big error of confusing the property of goodness itself with some other property that a good thing might have. It's exactly like saying that because lemons are yellow, the word yellow means citrusy. It's confusing two completely different things that just happen to appear together. So look at this. Saying pleasure is good, that's a totally legitimate ethical claim. You're taking a thing, pleasure, and you're saying it has this separate quality called goodness. And that's something we can actually have a meaningful debate about. Is it true? Is it false? Now we're doing ethics. But this, saying good means pleasure, that's the fallacy. You're not making a claim anymore, you're making a definition. And you've basically ended the conversation. If they're identical, then saying pleasure is good is just like saying pleasure is pleasure. It's a meaningless tautology, and ethics goes out the window.
And his orange analogy just makes this so obvious. Think about it. An orange is yellow, and it's also sweet. Does that mean the word yellow is the same thing as the word sweet? Of course not. They're two distinct qualities that this one object happens to have. And in the same way, an experience can be both pleasant and good, but that doesn't make pleasant and good the same thing.
Okay, so what's the upshot of all this? If we can't define good, what's the point? Well, by getting rid of this one big mistake, Moore says we can finally start asking the right questions, which gives us a much clearer path forward. And what this does is it lets us neatly separate ethics into two different jobs. On one side, you have the question of what is good in itself, things that have intrinsic value. These are the things that are valuable just for their own sake, the ultimate ends we're aiming for. On the other side, you have what's good as a means, things that have instrumental value. These aren't the end goal, but they are the path to get there.
So here it is, a brand new, much clearer way to do ethics. Step 1. Figure out what's good just for its own sake. What are the ultimate goals? That's the real core question of ethics. Step 2. Then you do the practical work. You use science and reason to figure out which actions, which paths, will cause more of that intrinsic good to exist in the world. By keeping those two things separate, we can finally think clearly.
But, and this is what's so cool, even with the super clear framework, Moore leaves us with these mind-bending puzzles. He talked about organic wholes, where the value of the whole thing is way more than just adding up its parts. A beautiful painting sitting in a dark room has almost no value. Your consciousness by itself has little value. But when you put them together, a conscious mind appreciating a beautiful painting, suddenly you have something of immense value. Where did that extra value come from? It shows that even when you find the simple building block, the things you can build with it are incredibly complex. So I'll leave you with that, the first and most important question that Moore says we should be asking. What do you think is truly good in and of itself?